So is global warming fact or fiction? Let's get to a debate. John Christy is professor of atmospheric science at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and Gavin Schmidt is a climate scientist at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. John Christy, you're a skeptic. You disagree with Al Gore. The disappearance, as he says, of the polar ice cap, how do you explain that?
Well, the polar ice cap has been melting for the last several years, but if you look down at the South Pole, you'll find that Antarctic sea ice is increasing. But I would say, as someone who actually builds climate data sets, I could take Mr. Gore to task on all of his assertions there.
Well, give us one example, because we have a limited amount of time.
Well, in terms of storms and droughts and floods, those things have always been with us, and they are not outside the range of natural variability, as we have found in looking very closely at the data sets that we can build these days. All
right, Gavin, what do you say?
The changes that we're seeing in the climates are outside of what we would expect under natural circumstances at the moment. The causes that humans have put into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, aerosols, the other greenhouse gases, do have a noticeable effect on the climate. We've detected it in fingerprint studies. We've looked at it all over the world, and these things are really happening now. The issue is not whether these things have ever happened before, but whether we're causing them. The presence of natural forest fires doesn't mean that arson doesn't exist. We can still attribute our role in climate change, even though, back in the Cretaceous period, it was much, much warmer than it is now.
Do you believe that man is playing a role in global warming, John Christy?
Well, I think man has a partial role in what is going on, but let me add that what is being referred to here is being assumed from climate models. And let me tell you, as someone who actually builds data sets to compare with climate models and the fingerprint strategies and so on, what we find is that I am underwhelmed, as someone would say, with what we see in the ability of climate models to prove anything. They really can't prove anything.
Can they, Gavin?
Climate models are a tool that allow us to understand why climate changed in the past, why it's changing now, and what that might mean for the future. They're just tools. They don't prove anything in the sense of a mathematical proof, but they do provide us with very good evidence that what we're seeing now is in fact caused by the things that we know that we're doing to the atmosphere.
John Christy, do you accept the notion that most scientists around the world agree with Gavin Schmidt and disagree with you?
Yeah, I would say it's been decades since I decided to leave the majority, the popular majority, but I just wanted to find out what the climate was doing, and that's why I went into the business of actually building for myself the data sets that describe the climate system.
And I just want to be precise, because a lot of people out there always assume that someone who disagrees, for example, with Al Gore on these issues is on the payroll of big oil, the big energy companies. You are not, are you?
That's right. I do not take any money from energy companies or oil companies or any of those.
Gavin, Tom Friedman, who obviously agrees with you, he wrote this in the New York Times on this email, these emails that were leaked, what's called ClimateGate. He wrote this, even though he strongly agrees with you. If we don't prepare and climate change turns out to be real, life on this planet could become a living hell, and that's why I'm for doing the Cheney thing on climate, preparing for 1%. But he does go on to say he was very upset about those leaked emails. He says, frankly, I found it very disturbing to read a leading climate scientist writing that he used a, quote, trick to, quote, hide a putative decline in temperatures or was keeping the contradictory research from getting a proper hearing. A lot of people are outraged when they go back 10 years and read that and believe that legitimate scientists were trying to suppress other information.
Well, that's just not true. The words that you've quoted there out of context, if read in the proper context, the trick is just meaning a technique. It's just a way of doing a smooth when you've got a time series that ends in the middle of where you want to do the smooth. It's nothing nefarious. It's nothing sneaky. The decline that they were talking about was in some tree ring records.
Let me interrupt for a second, Gavin, because I take it the individual, the scholar at the head of this institute at East Anglia University has now stepped down because of all of this.
Well, he stepped aside while the university is looking into these things, and I think that's perfectly appropriate. People should be able to investigate these things outside of the media storm that's been created over these emails. And let me tell you, if you had had 13 years of your emails poured over by people who are extremely hostile to you, I don't think anybody would survive that unscathed. And this has been very devastating for the people involved, and it's a huge invasion of their privacy. And I don't think we should forget that these emails were stolen. These are not government employees. These are not things that were released under a Freedom of Information Act. These were emails hacked from a mail server at their university and released completely illegally. I don't think that that is something that you should be encouraging, and I don't think that anybody here would really want that even to happen to their worst enemy.
Let's let John Christy respond to that.
Well, as someone who was derided in many of those emails, I just completely disagree with what Gavin has just said. When they say hide the decline, that's exactly what they were trying to do. It even is in the computer code. I think what this shows, in my view,
wrong, John. That's not
is
true.
that I think what this shows, in my view, is that our ignorance of the climate system is enormous, and our policymakers need to know about that.
Our ignorance about climate system is very large, but we do know some things. We do know that greenhouse gases are increasing because of human activity. We do know that the planet is warming. We do know that it's warming for the reasons that basic physics tells us that it's warming. There are lots of details and lots of issues that we still need to work on. Obviously, we're all scientists, and we're working on the things that are uncertain. No scientist makes a living by going around agreeing with everybody else's work. We are looking for the places where there is uncertainty. That's where scientists look. But when you do that, you can't forget that science is built on a foundation that goes back to the 19th century. The shape of that building, the whole edifice is not being changed because people are arguing about 1 or 2 bricks at the top and which temperature record is the best temperature record or not.
Let me just wrap it up because we're out of time. Very quickly, John Christy, I'll go back to the first question I asked you, the disappearance of the polar ice cap. How do you explain that?
Well, the North Pole has warmed in recent years, as I've said, but when we look at the entire climate system, there is so much, not just details, huge uncertainties about how the climate system reacts, and no one can prove that greenhouse gases, the extra greenhouse gases we are putting in the atmosphere, is causing all of it or part of it.
We'll leave it on that note, but hopefully we'll continue this discussion because the subject is not going away. The president will be in Copenhagen next week at this international global warming climate change conference. Appreciate it very much, John Christy and Gavin Schmidt.